talk on the salience of geography that was spoken about in the previous session. The esteemed panelists really brought in how the countries were formed, and once the countries are formed, countries actually went in to have their own character. And what is important is that when we're talking about 1971 war, we are actually talking about the character of a nation, where one nation, Pakistan, divided into two, had a character, a behavior, a culture of itself, and then what pans out is nothing but an outcome into a conflict. And of course, the division happens, and we are going to talk about the War of Liberation and how Bangladesh was created. So today in this panel, I have very esteemed panelists. I have Colonel Sajjad from Bangladesh sitting on my right. Well, he's a highly decorated and accomplished officer who's been decorated by Swadhinta Padak by Bangladesh and Padma Shri by India. Ladies and gentlemen, we not only welcome him, but we also celebrate his presence. And to discuss this very, very significant topic on the behavior of Pakistan, I have on my left Ambassador TCA Raghavan. He needs no introduction. He was our High Commissioner in Pakistan in 2013 to 15, and before that, he was the Deputy Chief of the Mission in 2003 and 7. So he understands Pakistan deeply according to how he felt Pakistan, the character and how it is built. So we will talk about it. And also, very recently, he was holding a very important think tanks, as a DG of it, in that appointment, Sapru House, that is a DG ICWA till 2021. General Raghavan, we will look forward to his deep insight into the behavior and the character of West Pakistan. And also, we have on my extreme right, Ambassador Pinak Chakravarti, who was in Dhaka. On the other side of the character of a nation, how it got shaped, and how the shape looks like today. So he was a High Commissioner there in Dhaka from 2007 to 2009. And before that, he was also the Deputy High Commissioner from 1999 to 2002. So, ladies and gentlemen,
I was also in Pakistan.
And okay, so
in Karachi.
and thank you very much for this intervention, because I think I need you more there today in this discussion than on the other side. A word about Colonel Sajjad. Well, he's a freedom fighter. He actually was born on the eastern side of Pakistan and called East Pakistan in 1951. And he says he was born in the language movement. And then later on, he joined a school which was actually a military school. And he, after passing out from school, he went and joined the academy in PMA Kakul. And the experiences of his training in PMA Kakul, and later on he was commissioned in 14 Parafield Regiment of Pakistan. And then something happened, well, he will only tell us. And then later on in Bangladesh, he rose to the rank of a colonel. But something went right or wrong, I don't know, but he would talk about it because he's celebrated, but he was terminated from service as a colonel at a very young age. So I'm not going to stand between me giving these introductions, because the introductions will start showing out as the discussion takes place. So I first start with Ambassador Raghavan.
Well, thank you very much, and I'm delighted to be part of this panel and very grateful to Valley of Words and to the USI for having invited me. May I begin by striking a slightly contrarian note, because I was really struck by the earlier discussion, and since both Sanjeev and General Sharma are here, may I begin by disagreeing. Yes, salience of geography, I don't think anyone can disagree, but the fact also is that over the millennia, ideology in the form of religion and ethnicity has been trumping geography routinely. So while geography certainly has a certain tactical salience, but in a larger strategic span of historical overview, I think ethnicity ideology, especially religion, are factors which we cannot ignore. And when we are talking about 1971 and Pakistan and the creation of Bangladesh, I think more than geography, yes, we all know there was a certain anomalous situation in 1947 because you have the two wings of this country widely separated by, in terms of distance, also by an adversarial neighbor. And yes, it does pose certain constraints. But what trumped, what the chain of events which led to the breakup of Pakistan are really explained by other factors also. And it's an open question of how much weightage you want to give to geography, or rather look at issues such as the incapacity or the inability to address a federal situation because of ethnicity and religion. And I think we can't simply look at the geographical separation of the two wings and say that this was inevitable. There were certain structural weaknesses in the ruling mindsets in Pakistan from 1947 onwards. And these weaknesses had their origins in the original demand for Pakistan itself, which is why people say that it was a country which was insufficiently imagined from the very outset. So, and I think the topic of our discussion today is about the garrison state, which really is about the ruling mindsets or the strategic mindsets in Pakistan. Now, just as an aside, the term garrison state really emerges, it can be traced down to the very beginnings of the Cold War. It gained a certain popularity because President Eisenhower referred to it in 1948 or 1949 as the outcome of a particular military-industrial complex which derives its legitimacy from a paranoia about the Soviet Union. And out of that, a garrison state is constructed. That was the thinking behind the original use of the term garrison state. It has been applied to Pakistan with a certain element of, with a certain degree of merit, because as is well known, in 1947, Pakistan was a state it was a country it was a state being created in a territory which had no idea of statehood in the sense of national sovereignty. There was a certain sense of what a provincial government is, but there was no real sense of what a national state, a nation state has to be. And in that confusion, because there was, the military had a certain preponderant role, because Pakistan, given its size and population, nevertheless got a much larger share of the undivided Indian army, and that gave to the military a certain role. I'll just complete with one final point. I think the short point which I'm trying to make is that when we look at the breakup of Pakistan, we have to keep one very important element, because that really explains the mindset which prevailed at that time. And that mindset, the traces of that we can find elsewhere too. We can find traces in our own country. Is one which equates national interest with national security.
Before I go to Colonel Sajjad, because I want him to deep dive into certain pattern, how Pakistan thinks and how the military thinks in Pakistan. And also, before that, I'll go to Ambassador Pinak Chakravarti. But just a point from you is that the two countries came up at the same time, India and Pakistan. India was to be a democracy, Pakistan was to be a democracy. So we wrote a constitution. We became republic. Pakistan was to write a constitution. It was to become a republic. But why did it not happen the way it was designed to happen? What was the compulsion that it actually not became a garrison, but actually a military state? Why is that? It is actually on the overall shell of democracy still is military. Why they cannot accept democracy in that country? Is it people or is it the military? So I want you to make a subtle comment on why military and why not democracy.
Well, I think there's no simple answer, but to my mind, this paranoia about India is certainly one factor. This view that the military is the ultimate guardian of the flame, and without the military, India will absorb the whole of Pakistan, and therefore the military has a preponderant role in public affairs. I think that is certainly a factor, because you cannot understand Pakistan today without constantly having to contextualize it vis-a-vis India. And that brings in this entire dilemma which it has faced since 1947 and continues to face today, which is that is national interest only equal to national security?
Thank you. Ambassador Chakravarti, thank you for your intervention to say that you sat in Karachi, which is not Punjab. And when later on you went to Bangladesh, which is certainly not Pakistan, but had a background in Pakistan, sitting outside the Punjab part of Pakistan, being in Karachi and sitting in Bangladesh later on, how do you see the nation state shaping up, where the behavior of people outside Punjab is different and how Punjab behaves differently to people of Pakistan? So let's dissect Pakistan in the psyche of Punjab, Pakhtun, military relationship and how it deals with the world. What is there in it that you would like to point out in the behavior?
Well, let me go back to what Raghavan was saying about a state, the formation of a state. Now, if you look at the speeches, etc., of the Muslim League and Jinnah and Sina, they wanted democracy. I mean, it was quite clear that even the Muslim League said so. But they were confused. They wanted to merge Islam. They wanted a secular democracy on Islamic principles. Now, I don't know what you can make out of that. How do you make a secular democracy based on Islamic principles? Now, this confusion in the minds of those leaders actually led to the Constitution, the Objectives Resolution, if you remember, is now the preamble, almost the preamble to the Pakistan Constitution, the latest 73 Constitution. So in 56, when the first Constitution was promulgated, it had this confusing thing about the Objectives Resolution. You wanted to be secular, you wanted to have a democracy, you wanted to have Islamic principles, and Pakistan had nothing to fall back on, no history, so the only history they keep falling back on, Muhammad bin Qasim came here in 712. Even recently, this year, one Pakistani diplomat tweets that in ancient Pakistan we had a great university called Takshila. Now, can you imagine that this identity issue is so very severely demoralizing for any country, not just Pakistan, that this is the mindset which grew. Now, why the military and became a garrison state? You know, Harold Laswell, an American sort of political scientist, used this term, garrison state, and he said, and I quote, and he wrote in the American Journal in 1937, in a seminal essay, World War was still 2 years away. Laswell cautioned that the purpose of his article was to consider the possibility that we are moving towards a world of garrison states, a world in which the specialists on violence are the most powerful group in society. I think this can explain a lot about Pakistan, why it became a garrison state. First of all, the politicians failed to produce a good constitution. And then, of course, when Ayub Khan came in and said, and what did Ayub say? He said, very interesting, he said that it would be appropriate to reiterate the fact that our eventual aim must be to develop democracy in Pakistan, but a type that suits the genius of our people. Our people are mostly uneducated and our politicians not so scrupulous. We therefore have to have a controlled democracy with checks and counter-checks. So now you see how the confusion in the minds of the leaders of Pakistan led to, of course, the military coup and things like that. Now the question, what you were saying about how do perceptions matter? I just can't help mentioning an anecdote. I come from what is today Bangladesh, my family. In a Dhaka district, Bikrampur and all that. You know Sujat very well. My father did his matriculation from Tangail. And when the 71 war was going on, I was still I think just out of school and in the college. he read something about, my father was in DRDO, so he knew defense and stuff like that. So he said that the paras are going in, and I am telling you that they will land near Tangail somewhere. So I said, why are you saying this? He says, look, I know the terrain, I know the geography, and from there they will have to come towards Dhaka. And believe it or not, he also said, later on we discovered that his school, Bindubashini, you know, Tangail Bindubashini's high school, very famous
I own
school.
the same school.
You are from the same school. Oh, wonderful. Was the place that actually the paras made their headquarters. I went to that school just to see because of. Anyway, those are anecdotal things. But coming back to perceptions. Now, what was the perception in Bangladesh, or let's say East Pakistan? You all know the history, so I sort of. One of the things that always surprises me that when they talk of West Pakistan, a normal Bangladeshi, an ordinary Bangladeshi will talk to them, oh, those Punjabis. They don't say West Pakistanis, they say Punjabis. That's the perception. They always felt these Punjabis have come and trying to lord it over us. That was the perception. Oh, by the way, in Bengali, the kurta we call a Punjabi. I don't know how many of you know it. Punjabi porechish, you know. Now, why is that? Because of that perception that this was probably brought by the Punjabis.
Yeah, thank you, Ambassador Chakravarti. Deep dive into the psyche of this nation. I'm very happy that we have the defense attaché here, Brigadier General Azad, sitting here with us. Who's actually a serving officer in Bangladesh Army, and how the army of West Pakistan dominated the East Pakistan at that time, and what is the connection between the East and West. So I turned to Colonel Sajjad and asked him that, coming from a military background yourself, you joined the cadet college at Chittagong, and then you, at 17 years, joined the Pakistan Military Academy at Kakul. And then in 69, you are there, then later on get commissioned in the 14th Para Field, which I would say is elite artillery regiment. And then somebody lands up calling you Abdul, and then say, oh, I am in Western or in a Pakistan army, but Abdul, what is Abdul?
Servant.
Yeah. So
Ghulam.
can you please tell us about your experiences in Pakistan Army, where there are Pakhtuns, there are Punjabis, there are Sindhis, there are Baluchis, maybe some people from the northern areas or not, and they have a deep impact because there's a neighboring Afghanistan, there is Iran, which is Shia, there are Hazaras are sitting very close to them. Then in the north, you have Tajiks. And all this tribal connections and, fault lines bring a Pakistan together, which has been forced state together. So therefore, was Pakistan army as a growing factor, or was this the reason to destroy Pakistan the way it is? So can I have your comment, please?
Thank you, sir. Welcome to my discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, you have heard many people speaking many things, many lectures all over the world. But you haven't heard till now a person who has been given a death sentence to be speaking in front of you. I have got a lot of awards, 71 later on and all that. But Pakistan has also gave me a very high award, highest awarded death sentence. And interestingly, that's still now valid. It's interesting. I have a photogenic memory, actually. I'm a master of map reading and night navigation. My commanders loved me because I could speak Urdu very well. When they used to call me Abdul or Ghulam, I didn't mind it. I started learning Urdu. My father told me you have to be one of them. And then I was very fair looking. Now I'm very dark with the vagaries of nature. So they didn't understand. They thought me to be a Karachi guy, actually. And the commanders used to take me around. Here will be the future in the LFC, line of control of Kashmir, Shakkargarh, Zafarwal, everything. And I used to memorize and read the map a little bit. And once entered the command post, I had made my plan already. One fine day, all the plans into my boot, one shirt, one pant, 20 rupees in my pocket, I escaped. Unfortunate, I was a young lieutenant, nobody cared about me much. When I was brought to Pathankot by the Central Reserve Police, suspected as a Pakistani spy because I had a Pakistani passport, they were flabbergasted. I tried to explain everything. I begged them. Then I was taken to Safdarjung enclave, kept there also. I think it was intelligence people. And many senior officers came, I think one of them must have been ex-DMO General K.K. Singh. Later on became the Northern Commander. Everybody very nice to me. But when I am talking to them about deployment, they are not listening to me carefully. I was all the time telling them, go further north. Because they know that you are going to attack from this place. Main obstacles are there. But I have read one of your official records which say one officer who escaped from Pakistan gave the information. I regret they have captured Zafarwal, 56 kilometers. They couldn't take Shakargarh. If they could take Shakargarh, they could permanently demolish the Kashmir, Pakistani Kashmir with rest of Pakistan. I cry for that. It's my rank which really pains me now. And I know where Arun Khetrapal was martyred, Hoshiar Singh was severely wounded, and many of your soldiers, and I am in touch with the families till now. What happens is this, that Indians require to be a little more flexible in the Western sector. You could have made it. Then you wouldn't have discussed about all the geopolitics and mapping actually. I regret that very much, sir.
Colonel Sajjad, I just wanted to intervene and I take you back into the psyche of Western Pakistan, army and Pakistan as a state. That India is also a country with many states and many languages. But what is there in Pakistan?
Okay, but
that all others are riffraffs and secondary, but it's only the Punjabis and the Pakhtuns, and that is the army. So why do you think Pakistan is a garrison state from a perspective where everybody else is on the periphery, but Pakistan Army and a community which actually runs the Pakistan Army is at the center stage? We need to understand more about the Pakistan, the behavior and their army and the connection between them.
Sir, you say about statehood. Pakistan has, and now even, no statehood actually. It's a zamindari. Please remember, when Pakistan was liberated, what we saw, within 23 years, Jinnah's Pakistan became a Qabristan. Very important. Number two, every of their leaders have been killed. Let's come to Jinnah. I have records to prove to you. Jinnah was killed. Liaquat Ali Khan, their famous prime minister, killed. Jinnah was not a Punjabi. Liaquat Ali Khan was from UP. Ayub Khan was not killed. Yahya Khan was not killed, but Bhutto was killed. He's a Sindhi. You have to go through the lines very carefully. Ziaul Haq was killed. None of them are Punjabis actually. The Punjab had to dominate. They wanted slowly, and why Ayub Khan was selected? Because he and Yahya Khan, they didn't mind him. They are Pathans, but settled in Punjab. And they are Punjabanized. That's what thing.
Thank you. Thank you, Colonel Sajjad.
That's very important.
Thank you, Colonel Sajjad.
One thing more, sir, let me tell you one thing, that I am a little worried about our future. War kills life, love, character, but mostly kills history. Such a great victory you have in 71 together with us. There is no culture behind it. In Bangladesh, with 26 years of military rule again, or non-democratic or anti-liberation forces after the killing of father of the nation, history took a backseat. I have been going through and attending many webinars with Indian students, and some of them civilian students, they are helping me. They don't know about 71, sir. That's the biggest victory you have. And another thing, sir, it's not the gun, but the man behind the gun. Let me tell you, I have seen Indian soldiers. And not because I'm talking here, I tell the same thing to my students back in Khulna or in Bundibash school or wherever you say. There is a soldier over here, his name is Ian Cardozo. I saw him being blown apart just in front of me in the minefield. And then I came running. They were trying to treat him. He was cutting his own leg by his own kukri.
You're talking about General Ian
Yes,
Cardozo,
he is
who's
here,
sitting
sir.
right here.
Sir, can you stand, sir? Then the war was over. Pakistani soldiers started coming. They want to give blood to him. He's dying. He says, I want no Pakistani blood. Before fainting, and nobody dared. I have seen Dil Bahadur Chetri of 4x5 GRs cutting the throat of 9 Punjabi officers, elite 31 Punjab regiment. That shattered Pakistan's morale. One man matters. I have seen Sipai Ansu Prasad. I carried his dead body, 17 years, 3 months, following the order of the company commander, getting blown up fully. And his wife Chitra Devi after the war meets me and says, he was such a handsome man. How did he die? Was he not looking very handsome when he died? I couldn't say anything. I don't want to lie to her. He was nothing but a few pieces of flesh. So, with so much of sacrifice that you did. And this is the most battle-inoculated army in the whole world. Take from history how many battles you have fought. So, with that history behind you, what is geopolitics? It will be ultimately one man and one gun. And that's what you have to understand. Let's love history. If you don't love history, history will hate you, and will fall apart. Together we fought in 71. We should fight together again. Not in the battlefield only, for the cause of humanity. And that's what I want to tell you. War kills, but let not war kill history. Thank you, sir.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Colonel Sajjad. I will turn to Ambassador T.C.A. Raghavan, who, sitting in our High Commission in Islamabad, would be dealing with politicians and the military officers and the other diplomatic community. So one is that you could have been looked at India, a country which actually dismembered Pakistan in 1971. Also a great nation which has a great army, which actually created military history in 1971. I want to ask you two short questions, maybe you could answer in one go. Is that how does Pakistan look at India today with that defeat that they suffered and the humiliation that they suffered? And when they deal with you, how does that psyche of the country pans out? And second thing is, when you deal with a politician and when you deal with a military officer in Pakistan, what are the two differences that you see in your dealings? Ambassador Raghavan.
Well, what always struck me about Pakistan, and I left in January 2016, so I don't know what the present mood would be, but what astonished me about Pakistan from the time I first went there in 2003 was the extent of goodwill there was about India. Now, I know it sounds a bit absurd, but that was my overwhelming sentiment, that at the street level, and more than the street level, even people who were high in government, even those in the military, there was this great fascination with India, and if I may say, I think a certain amount of admiration. Not because of the military factors, but admiration, firstly, about democracy, secondly, about that you have so many languages, so many ethnicities, so many different cultures, and yet you manage to work this system. And thirdly, admiration for the institutions you had set up, which is your Election Commission, your Supreme Court, the IITs, Bollywood, etc., etc. I cannot say that there was no hostility towards India. It is there. It was very much there too. But there is something about the Pakistani nature that when they are dealing with Indians in particular, they are always on their best behavior. So the hostility remains very much a subterranean factor.
Or was it a diplomatic talk that they did with you
No.
and did something else behind you?
No, I don't think it was only diplomatic. I think they have a certain, Pakistanis are a mannered people. They have very good manners. And it's something which I think because we don't have that good manners, we find it difficult to understand, but they are a highly mannered people. Good manners doesn't mean that that is really their intention. But my own sense always was, and I'll stop at that, was that yes, there is a great deal of hostility towards India. There are these racial memories about 1971. There are even older racial memories relating to Islamic identity and so on. But I never felt for a minute that these factors stop you from doing business with them. That it's not as if the past has such a huge overhang that you can't deal with them politically, or you can't come to sustainable arrangements with Pakistan. I think the current mood in India is that there is nothing which can be done with Pakistan, and the best that can be hoped for is some kind of an uncertain, cold peace. If that can be maintained, that's good enough. My sense was that no, there was much more which was possible. It's risky, but it's possible.
And a comment about the relationship between a politician and a military general.
Well, the relationship was always one between unequals. And the Pakistani military officers, both retired and serving, would always say that it's not as if we want to get involved in politics. We have a certain position in Pakistan. We are quite happy with it. We want to safeguard it. But the politicians drag us into the political game. And there's some truth in that. That it is not as if that there is a military mastermind which is choreographing or orchestrating everything which happens in Pakistan. It is the inability or the weakness of politics in Pakistan which drags the military in, rather than the military going in on its own.
So what you're saying is, if it is seen to be a garrison state, I would again reiterate, it is not because army wants it to be a garrison state, because it is the situation in Pakistan largely which demands it to be contained by a garrison.
As I said, in Pakistan, whatever happens is contextualized vis-a-vis India. So there is this mindset of a garrison state is not just limited to the military. It is in many ways all pervasive. But I will say that these mindsets exist elsewhere too, and to some extent, these mindsets are inevitable when you have a smaller neighbor next to a large country.
Excellent.
One of our former foreign secretaries, Mr. Rasgotra, he has famously written that dealing with Nepal for India is much more difficult, 100 times more difficult than dealing with Pakistan. I think we have to understand the mindset when you are a preponderant force in South Asia and all your neighbors are smaller than you.
Yeah, so it is like, the attitude of big brother and patronizing attitude,
Absolutely.
which I suppose makes a relationship and the perceptions shape accordingly. Yeah. Thank you, Ambassador Raghavan. Ambassador Chakravarti, I would like to ask you, sitting in Dhaka, how would you see the traces of what the West Pakistan Army did in East Pakistan as an Indian, as I would say Bengali, which you spoke about your roots and connections with people of Bangladesh as well. How would you see the traces and influences of West Pakistan and the memories of 1971 and the atrocities committed? Do you still feel that there is something which exists, or over a period of time it has been overcome? Or has Pakistan again gone back to do its monkey tricks, as I may not have any other expression, into Bangladesh? Is it so? Did you feel it?
Well, to begin with, let us acknowledge that Bangladesh is celebrating its half a century of its independence. they have been independent for double the number of years than they were East Pakistan. So this is a fact, and one has to acknowledge. A new generation has come up. But let me say that the influence of West Pakistan lingers in a sense that there are many people of, let's say, our generation who went to school in Pakistan, and they have friends in Pakistan. They're ex-army and navy, other people, and I can see it on Facebook because I am friends with many of them, and I could see some comments coming from there, here, and sometimes a little bit of friction also occurs. But that is not to say that that Bangladeshis have. I don't think they can ever forgive the West Pakistanis. I mean, at least this generation will not be able to forgive them from what they saw they are being done to them. And of course, there is a lot of effort to retain the memory of those horrible times that the Bangladeshis functioned, and so many people died, women raped, and things like that. There is, of course, the whole debate about what the numbers are, but I won't get into that. So the perception issue that I think General Pannu seems to be pushing me to vocalize is that the perception today, I mean, let's put it this way. Perception about India. Let me also say, what is the perception of India? I was constantly, teased, you can say, mainly I would say, use the word teased, ki, hello, big brother. And my friends and others, journalists, ki, sir, how are you playing your role as big brother? This was a common refrain in Bangladesh when I interacted, and I speak Bengali, and when I used to meet Sheikh Hasina, she used to pointedly tell me the first time that High Commissioner, I'm not going to talk to you in English, I will talk to you in Bengali. So I said, fine, ma'am, that's your prerogative. I understand both languages. So anyway, the point is that the perception aspect about India also is the big brother. See, what General Pannu said is very, very crucial. The asymmetry in almost every metric, although Bangladesh, I confess, has been doing much better on many of the human development indices than we are today. And Bangladesh is probably going to, or has already, gone past India in per capita income. You must study the economic rise of Bangladesh. It is a phenomenon. If you look at all the matrices from indexes, all the indices from when it was born to what it is today. And Bangladesh is, I'm telling you, Bangladesh is going to be one of the major economies. By I think 2050 or so, Bangladesh, the projection is that Bangladesh will have a GDP of $500 billion. This is $500 billion for a country that is, of course, populated, but not very large.
Thank you, Ambassador Chakravarti. I know with Colonel Sajjad we have more sessions, and we will talk about what happens in Bangladesh and how the relationship would grow. But I'll take you back to our subject. As somebody who served in the Western Pakistan, let me qualify that, as an army officer, do you think how General Raghavan and Ambassador Raghavan, slip of tongue. Sorry for that.
You have another title.
No, I'm happy you're saying thank you for that, because that only makes me happy also. How Ambassador Raghavan described it. How would you feel that things have changed over a period of time, or we are living with some perceptions which are actually not true, and we are actually putting a lot of perceptions on Pakistan which may have changed? Your comments, please.
Let's face facts. Bangabandhu had only 3.5 years. After that, entire family, all national leaders were killed. Where the killers are hiding now? One of them are hiding in Kolkata even, but Indian government was kind to hand over.
We got him,
Yeah, he was hiding as a school teacher. The main killers, we have information hiding in Pakistan. How we know? One of their wives died and some family members visited. We are aware of everything. After that, 26 years, one generation's idea formulation takes about 12 to 14 years. 2 generations have been fed, Sheikh Mujib is bad, Indians captured, broke Pakistan, everything. After that, only Sheikh Hasina is in for 12 years only. And look at what she's trying to do. Abid Hassan, the leading economist of Pakistan, my class fellow, he was a World Bank lead economist also, says recently, the way Bangladesh is advancing and developing, within 10 years, Pakistan will request Bangladesh for aid and grant.
Yes.
It's right. Such a small country, $50 billion reserve, we don't touch it. We have recently given Sri Lanka aid to repay the Chinese, the money.
It's a currency swap.
Currency swap, So these are things that are happening. But she has a lot of problem. But she has now focused on 2 aspects. Number 1 is economy. Number 2 is history. And you understand it. And why I come here is also history. Before I came here, I didn't want to act busy. I was given a task. We have a digital exhibition going on for the first time. Bapu Bangabandhu, together. And I was made in charge. Every day, 8 school children coming. I should take them, exhibition, brief them, question and answer session, another group coming. Morning 8 o'clock to evening 8 o'clock, 12 hours. So these efforts are going on. We really want to come back to the path of history. Very important. But those 26 years cannot be covered by 12 years. Human beings are by nature negative. And please remember, sir, you fought in 71. You saw the poorest of the poor were Mukti Bahini boys. And rich people's son went back to Karachi or to England or America. Now, when the war is over, they come back. We were the commanders in the field. Second lieutenant. Our general staffs were all in Pakistan. They come back now after Sheikh Mujib killed. They take all command and we are kicked out within no time.
So we are
because Pakistani intelligence says he's a bastard. He took our secrets, got our soldiers killed, kick him out. At least I have not been thrown out of the world. I'm very happy for that. So it's a difficult game, sir. And a lot of you have complained about Bangladesh. Look at this Prime Minister. She has to select ministers. Who are the qualified people? They have nothing to do with 71. Professors, generals, doctors, secretaries. Because it was a poor man's war. That villager who took rifle, he has gone back to the village now, and he cannot become a secretary. He hasn't passed his metric. That's the problem we have.
Colonel
So realize
Sajjad,
that, sir.
we are going to have more sessions on this. I'm coming to you, sir. Actually, we simply ran out of time because it was, for me also, I got so deeply involved in listening to your, very intense conversation. But I'll take this liberty of, allowing one question to be at least asked. I suppose people would be asking more questions to you in the due course. Please.
Sir.
You seem to be very well versed with the Pakistan army history also.
Yes.
You just mentioned about the Shakargarh. You are fully aware of the terrain over there. I will ask you a question pertaining to the Shakargarh. The Pakistan army had 3 brigades across the Ravi, between Ravi and Ben River. Whereas we were only 2/3. We had the 2 brigades. I have seen the battle plan of the Pakistan army. I read the military history book also. What was the reason of the failure of Pakistan to lose very badly in this sector?
Yes. Number one, sir, all Indians knew everything. Within 5th of December, all of their ammunition dumps were blown up. Their bridges were blown up. Headquarters were blown up. My commander, Brigadier Hamdani, was screaming, that AROP on the top, Sajjad is sitting there guiding the fire. It was so accurate, I was not there. So they lost because the Indians have the information. Number 2 is this, sir. There's a deep conspiracy in Pakistan military. The Strike Force North, Gujranwala Corps, the elite Pakistan's corps, commanded by Lieutenant General M.K. Bashir, and the biggest armored division, 1st Armored Division, and 6th, 17th Infantry Division, Major M.K. Shah, all these people are there. They didn't counterattack. You know why? Because there is a conspiracy in the army headquarters that Yahya Khan has to be kicked out. Bhutto has to be brought in. And the CGS was in charge of the strike force. He didn't move the force. If he did move the force in Shakargarh, you would have a bloody nose. I think so. And that's another story. There is a deep conspiracy in Pakistan military every time that we have to understand. I have records to prove that.
So, Colonel Sajjad, we are going to continue to talk about it. We simply ran out of time. I would just conclude by saying that. All right. So, thank you very much. I think it's a great opportunity also that we also have time. So, Colonel Thapar, please.
Well, actually, my point is that we had a brilliant victory in 1971. And militarily, I think purely militarily, we would have achieved our aim by destroying the Pakistani army once and for all, militarily. We did not do that. We agreed to the ceasefire. Had we continued for a few days more, the things would have been entirely different, militarily. Diplomatically, sir, what was the reason for this kind of an agreement which Mrs. Indira Gandhi went for, despite the tremendous victory we had? No territorial realignment was done, no concessions were taken, J&K remained as it was, and Bhutto walked off laughing. So if you can just throw some light on it.
Well, thank you, sir. There are different views on this. My view is that we got as much as we could have got in 1971. You were able to achieve what you did in East Pakistan because of a certain combination of international circumstances, which was principally that the Soviet Union was prepared to back you in East Pakistan. The Soviet Union was not prepared to back you with regard to what you wanted to do in West Pakistan. And everyone felt by mid-December 1971 that you have achieved a great deal of your strategic objectives. So don't push the envelope. And I think Mrs. Gandhi understood that intuitively. It was not a military or tactical situation she had to deal with. And she understood that we have got as much as we had originally wanted to get, which was break up the Pakistani state. And this was a considerable victory. Let's not underestimate it. Thereafter, to think that you could push the envelope and get the Pakistanis to agree with regard to J&K, with regard to the ceasefire line, the LOC, etc., I think it's a bit delusional, because the international concert which existed and which supported you, you see, by December 1971, even the United States had understood, and even the Chinese had understood, that the possibilities of Pakistan continuing as a unified state with two wings, that possibility no longer existed. But I don't think that concert would have been with you if you had continued, if you thought that you could use this opportunity to deal with West Pakistan. Yes. Also, the second factor is dealing with the Pakistani army in East Bengal was quite different from dealing with the Pakistani army in West Pakistan. I think it's not as if you would have dealt with the same kind of troops. There was a big difference.
Yes, yes. Actually, India was also fighting two wars, and Pakistan was also fighting
Sir,
two
I
wars.
have a serious objection
yes.
to this one, sir, if you allow me to say, sir. Internationally, we were in a much better position because American 7th Fleet was followed by Russian 6th Fleet. It had started from D.P. Dhor's meeting with Brezhnev, reveals everything. They had a frigate group of British, which we forget, and the 7th Fleet. But behind that was much bigger 6th Fleet of Russia. So we didn't have to worry about that. Number two, sir. The tragedies of 71 is that you have won in the battlefield, lost in the confidence table. Please don't be patriotic about it. I feel pained. Sir, you know about it. 75% of Indian soldiers and officers who were captured were slaughtered by Pakistan. Okay, forget of Mukti Bahini and common villages, lakhs and lakhs were killed. You should have tried the war criminals. Then Pakistan would have lost their legitimacy in this world. You gave them up as a VIP prisoners. Niazi says, ये हरामजादा कौम का मैं सबक सिखाऊंगा उस नक्शे में बदल दूंगा. Yahya Khan says, on the 26th, I will kill 3 million of them, rest will eat from my palm. So that's their plan. With all the records available, you couldn't try them. A symbolic try would have destroyed their nation. There would be rioting everywhere in Pakistan. I don't want rioting, but there would be. There will be dissension in the army. You today won't, but then you left all the VIP prisoners to attack you in Kargil, and many of them took part in the same operation. And then insurgencies have gone in. You get a chance once in a lifetime, sir. You have lost it. Very sorry about that.
In fact, I would like to
Sir,
draw
we are seeking for permission of our commanders. Sir, only one night, leave this area. Let's do the job. Very cruel, but that would have made history. We are telling brigadiers and generals, begging them, sir, leave only once. They are all protecting them and ready to shoot us if you go in. I understand human rights and all that. But human rights is for human. If they are not human, what rights do they have? Even now, the widows cry in Bangladesh. The rape victims cry that these people have gone away. And nobody tried anybody. This Tikka Khan was made into army commander, army chief of staff. Rao Farman Ali was made chief of the Fauji Foundation. All of them, Brigadier Jahangir Arbab, who did massacre in Dhaka, hundreds and thousands. He took 278 Hindu people, men from inside the temple and shot them. We are smoking with cigarettes. And you have left them. Is that what you can say? Is it a part of world politics? Victims cry. Their cry will never stop, sir. You lost opportunity, golden opportunity. God gives you opportunity once in a lifetime only.
Yeah, thank you, Colonel Sajjad. In fact, I'll draw attention to the audience before we finish is that Christine Fair has written an article in Garhwal Post very recently, last week, in which actually she talks about things which is her perception, in which she talks about 1971 unfinished agenda. And I asked her, what is this unfinished agenda? But she's part and parcel of this program. She is likely to come again virtually and talk to us. You can ask her this question. Why did she say that India wins the battles and Pakistan wins the wars? I don't know what she meant, but I think where she's talking about is lost opportunities. I recommend that you read that article. You will have your perception, because at the moment we cannot go back to history. We can only look at the perceptions that people carry of the history. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, my esteemed panelists, for really bringing in perspectives which are very special. Thank you. Jai Hind.